The millionaire needed to marry to keep the family inheritance and chose his maid as his bride, but the reflection in the private elevator mirror showed a different Harrison Reed than usual. His aristocratic features, normally composed, revealed a tension that not even his perfectly adjusted Italian tie could disguise. As he reached the penthouse of the Reed Tower in Manhattan, his footsteps echoed down the marble corridor that led to the boardroom. "You have 3 months, Harrison." The voice of the family's lawyer, Maxwell Porter, still resonated in his mind from the reading of the will that morning. "Your father was very specific. Either you marry by your 35th birthday, or control of Reed Enterprises passes to your cousin Nicholas." Harrison pushed open the double doors of the meeting room, where his cousin Nicholas Reed was already waiting for him with a calculating smile. The panoramic view of New York provided the backdrop for what promised to be another clash between the cousins. "How are you feeling, cousin?" Nicholas asked, twirling a pen between his fingers. "Have you started making a list of suitors?" "Spare me your false interest, Nicholas." Harrison kept his voice controlled, even though he wanted to wipe that smile off his cousin's face. "My father may have put that ridiculous clause in his will, but you know very well that it was because of your influence." Victoria Martinez watched the scene discreetly as she served coffee to the executives. As the housekeeper of the Reed mansion for 5 years, she knew the dynamics of that family well. Her dark brown eyes captured every detail as she moved silently around the room. "Miss Martinez," Harrison called out suddenly, "please prepare my office for the next meeting." Victoria nodded, feeling a wave of nausea, a constant reminder of her own complicated situation. 2 weeks ago, she had discovered that she was pregnant by Marcus, her ex-fiancé, who had disappeared without a trace after discovering her pregnancy. As she walked through the corridors of the Reed mansion, her mind calculated how long she could hide her condition. Back in his office, Harrison loosened his tie and slumped into his leather chair. His companies were at stake. The empire his father had built over decades could end up in the hands of Nicholas, known for his questionable business practices and lack of scruples. That's when his eyes landed on Victoria, who was discreetly organizing some documents. Something about her quiet efficiency and natural dignity had always impressed him. An idea began to form in his mind. Risky, unlikely, but potentially the solution to his problems. "Victoria," he called, his voice softer than usual. "Could you stay a moment?" She turned around, her hands unconsciously protecting her still imperceptible belly. "Yes, Mr. Reed? How long have you been working for our family?" "5 years, sir. And during that time, you've always been absolutely reliable and discreet." He stood up and walked over to the window. "I need to make you an offer." Victoria felt her heart race. "What kind of proposal, sir?" "A deal." Harrison turned to face her. A marriage of convenience. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria remained motionless, her face a mask of professional composure, while her mind whirled. "I know it may sound crazy," Harrison continued, "but it would be a beneficial arrangement for both of us. You would receive considerable financial compensation, and I would retain control of the companies. After a year, we could divorce discreetly." Victoria thought of her family in Phoenix, her parents struggling with medical debts after her mother's cancer treatment, her younger sister needing help with college. And now, with a baby on the way, "Why me?" she asked, her voice just a whisper. "Because you're the only person I can trust to keep this arrangement strictly professional." Harrison watched her intently. "You know how this family works. You understand the importance of discretion, and most importantly, you have integrity." Harrison's words hung in the air between them. Victoria knew she should tell him about her pregnancy, but the fear of losing this opportunity to help her family paralyzed her. Besides, in a few months, when the truth came out, the deal would already be done. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Until tomorrow." Harrison sat down again. "I know it's a short time, but my situation is urgent." Victoria nodded slowly. "I'll consider your proposal, Mr. Reed." As she left the office, Victoria felt the weight of her choices on her shoulders. In her room in the staff quarters, she touched her belly gently. A marriage of convenience with Harrison Reed could solve her financial problems and give her son a better life. But building this arrangement on a lie could destroy everything. Harrison, alone in his office, watched the city through the window. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky with orange hues that were reflected in the skyscrapers. He knew he was gambling big, but with Nicholas breathing down his neck and his father's empire at risk, what choice did he have? The next day promised dramatic changes for both of them, changes that neither was truly prepared to face. The game of appearances was about to begin, but the secrets kept by Victoria would turn this farce into something far more complex than either of them could have imagined. Victoria had been up all night, sitting in the small armchair in her bedroom in the staff quarters of the Reed mansion. Harrison's proposal echoed in her mind as she stared at the screen of her cell phone, with a photo of her parents smiled back at her. Her mother's last medical bill had arrived that afternoon, another $50,000 that her family didn't have. Getting up, she walked over to the mirror and lifted up her blouse, looking at her still flat abdomen. In a few weeks, her condition would begin to show. Morning nausea was already a constant companion, as was the guilt for considering hiding something so significant from Harrison. The sound of her alarm surprised her. 5:30 in the morning, time to start another day. Victoria took a quick shower, put on her impeccable uniform, and tied her dark hair up in the usual bun. As she walked down the service stairs, she bumped into Rosa, the cook, who was already preparing breakfast. "Darling, you look pale," Rosa commented, pushing a cup of ginger tea towards her. "Still feeling unwell?" Victoria forced a smile. "It'll pass, Rosa. Thanks for the tea." At 7 o'clock sharp, Harrison came down for breakfast. Victoria noticed that he didn't seem to have slept well either. His navy blue tie was slightly askew, something unusual for someone so meticulous. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she greeted him, pouring her usual black coffee. "Victoria," he replied, his voice softer than usual. "About our conversation yesterday, I accept your proposal," she interrupted him, the words coming out before she lost her nerve. Harrison put down his cup, studying it carefully. "Are you sure? Do you fully understand what you're agreeing to do?" Victoria nodded, sitting down when he gestured to the chair in front of her. "I need to be honest about my motivations, Mr. Reed. My family is facing serious financial difficulties. My mother is still undergoing treatment, and the bills—" "I understand," Harrison interrupted her gently, "and I appreciate your honesty. I will instruct my lawyers to prepare the necessary documents, including a prenuptial agreement that will guarantee your financial security." Breakfast was interrupted by Harrison's cell phone. It was Nicholas. "Cousin dear," the sarcastic voice echoed over the speakerphone. "I hear you've canceled all your meetings for today. Any progress in your search for a bride?" "Actually, yes," Harrison replied, his eyes meeting Victoria's. "I'm engaged." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Excuse me? You heard me. I'm going to marry Victoria Martinez." Victoria felt her stomach turn, and it wasn't just because of her pregnancy. The reality of her situation was beginning to weigh heavily on her shoulders. "Your housekeeper?" Nicholas laughed incredulously. "That's pathetic, even for you, Harrison." "Mind your own business, Nicholas." Harrison ended the call abruptly. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Harrison called in his legal team, and Victoria found herself signing documents that guaranteed her discretion and set out the terms of the agreement. The wedding would take place in 2 weeks, a small and discreet ceremony. "We'll need to make this convincing," Harrison explained as they walked through the gardens of the mansion later that day. "The press will investigate our relationship. We have to create a plausible story." Victoria fiddled nervously with the engagement ring on her finger, a stunning piece that Harrison had arranged in record time. "You could say that we've gradually gotten closer during my time working here." "Yes, that makes sense, and it explains why we've kept a low profile." Harrison stopped, turning to her. "Victoria, I want you to know that, despite the circumstances, I will treat you with the utmost respect and consideration." She felt tears forming in her eyes, guilt and gratitude mixing in her chest. "Mr. Reed," "Harrison, there's something I need." "Harrison," the voice of Maxwell Porter, the lawyer, interrupted the moment. "The journalists are at the gate. Apparently, Nicholas has already leaked the news of the engagement." Harrison instinctively put a protective arm around Victoria. Are you ready for your first public appearance as my fiancé? Victoria swallowed dryly, her confession once again stifled by the circumstances. Yes, I'm ready. As they walked towards the mansion, Victoria felt the weight of her secrets grow. In 2 weeks, she would become Mrs. Reed, and her son, who Harrison still didn't know existed, would technically be the heir to Reed Enterprises. The game of appearances was just beginning, and she prayed that when the truth came out, there would be enough forgiveness for all her sins of omission. The announcement of Harrison Reed's engagement to his housekeeper dominated the headlines of all the New York tabloids. Victoria stared, stunned, at her own photo splashed across the front page of the New York Daily, while trying to keep breakfast in her stomach. The morning sickness was getting harder and harder to hide. "We need to make some immediate changes," Harrison declared, entering the office where Victoria was going over the wedding arrangements. "As of today, you're moving into the east wing of the mansion. I've already asked them to prepare the main guest suite." Victoria looked up from the papers, feeling a pang of anxiety. Physical proximity would make it even more difficult to hide her condition. "Don't you think that's a bit hasty? The press is watching our every move. We need to look like a genuine couple," Harrison explained, loosening his tie. "Besides, Nicholas has hired a private investigator. Rosa saw him hanging around the estate this morning." Victoria's cell phone vibrated. It was her sister Elena, sending yet another message about the hospital bills. Guilt squeezed her chest as she slid the phone back into her pocket. Every day that passed without telling Harrison the truth seemed to dig a deeper hole. "We also need to discuss your new position in the company," Harrison continued, not noticing her discomfort. "As my wife, you'll have to attend corporate events, charity dinners. Maxwell is organizing etiquette classes," and Victoria ran into the adjoining bathroom, no longer able to contain her nausea. Through the closed door, she could hear Harrison's worried voice. "Victoria, are you all right?" "Just feeling sick," she replied, rinsing her face. "It must be the stress." When she emerged from the bathroom, she found Harrison on the phone to his private doctor, Dr. Anderson. "He can see you in an hour." "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is," Harrison insisted, his tone brooking no argument. "I can't have my fiancé sick on the eve of the wedding." Dr. Anderson's office on the Upper East Side was as luxurious as you'd expect for a doctor from Manhattan's wealthiest families. Victoria sat nervously in the waiting room, aware of the curious stares of the other patients. "Ms. Martinez?" The nurse called out to her. "The doctor will see you now." Dr. Anderson was a middle-aged man with a paternal air that made her feel instantly guilty. "So, what's bothering the future, Mrs. Reed?" Victoria took a deep breath. This could be the moment to reveal everything, to let the truth come out through medical channels. But the words got stuck in her throat. "Just morning nausea and dizziness," she answered vaguely. The doctor frowned. "How long have these symptoms persisted?" "A few weeks. We'll need to do some tests," he declared, picking up his requisition pad. "Including a pregnancy test, of course. Standard procedure." Victoria's heart raced. "Actually, doctor," the office door opened and Harrison walked in. "Sorry to intrude. The meeting ended earlier, and I thought I'd accompany Victoria." Dr. Anderson smiled. "How thoughtful. I was just explaining that we'll need to do some routine tests." Victoria spent the rest of the appointment in a state of controlled panic, watching Harrison and the doctor discuss her health as if she wasn't there. When they finally left the office, she had a pile of test requests in a knot in her stomach. "I'm going to schedule all the tests for tomorrow," Harrison declared as they climbed into his Mercedes. "I want to make sure you're okay." Victoria looked out of the window, watching the busy streets of Manhattan. Somewhere in that city, Marcus was carrying on with his life, completely oblivious to the chaos he had left behind. She discreetly touched her womb, thinking how her son deserved better than a father who ran away from his responsibilities. Back at the mansion, Victoria found Rosa in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "Me hija," the cook whispered, checking that they were alone. "How long are you going to keep this from him?" "I can't tell him now, Rosa," Victoria replied, tears threatening to fall. "If Harrison calls off the wedding, my family. What if he finds out later? It'll be worse, you know that." The sound of footsteps interrupted the conversation. Nicholas Reed entered the kitchen, his calculating smile more pronounced than ever. "What a touching scene," he commented, his cold eyes fixed on Victoria. The future Mrs. Reed confabulating with the servants. "Old habits are hard to break, aren't they? What do you want, Nicholas?" Victoria straightened her posture, meeting his gaze. "Just to get to know my future cousin better," he replied, stepping closer. "After all, we all have our secrets, don't we, Victoria?" The threatening tone in his voice made Victoria freeze. Did he know? Had he found out about her pregnancy? "Nicholas," Harrison's voice cut through the tense air in the kitchen. "I thought I'd made it clear that you're not welcome here. I just came to say congratulations in person," Nicholas retorted, but his smile remained. After all, family is family. As Nicholas left, Victoria realized that time was running out. Soon, medical tests would reveal his condition, and Nicholas clearly suspected something. The truth would come out. The only question was when, and how much it would cost everyone involved. The week leading up to the wedding turned the Reed mansion into a hub of frenetic activity. Victoria watched the preparations for her new room in the East Wing. Feeling like an intruder in a movie she didn't know the script for. The closet, larger than her old maid's room, was already filled with designer clothes selected by a personal stylist hired by Harrison. "Your first interview will be with Vanity Fair tomorrow," Harrison announced, entering the room without ceremony. "We need to get our story straight." Victoria looked away from the mirror where she was adjusting a Chanel dress, another gift that made her feel out of place. The morning sickness had subsided, but the anxiety over the results of the medical tests was eating her up inside. "Mr. Reed," she began, but was interrupted. "Harrison," he corrected her gently. "If we're going to convince the world that this is real, you need to call me by my first name." "Harrison," she tried again, the name sounding strange on her lips. "About the exams," his phone rang, interrupting her once again. It was Maxwell Porter. "Bad news," Harrison frowned as he listened. "Nicholas is challenging the validity of the marriage before the council. He claims it's an obvious fraud." Victoria felt her stomach turn. The word fraud echoed in her mind, amplifying her guilt. "I need to go to the company to sort this out." Harrison put his cell phone away. "The driver will take you to the lab for the tests. Don't worry about Nicholas. He has no proof of anything." As soon as Harrison left, Victoria dialed the number she had memorized the night before. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Dr. Amanda Chen's office." "I need an urgent appointment," Victoria whispered, checking that she was alone. "It's about a high-risk pregnancy." At Reed Enterprises, Harrison was facing his own private hell. Nicholas had called an extraordinary board meeting, and the looks on the faces of the senior executives didn't hide their skepticism about the sudden engagement. "My cousin is clearly desperate," Nicholas gestured dramatically. "A governess? Frankly, that's an insult to my uncle's memory." "Your concern for my father's memory is touching," Harrison replied coolly, "especially considering that you tried to sabotage his last project before his passing." The comment caused murmurs among the counselors. The project in question, a sustainable housing complex for low-income families, had been Richard Reed's final dream. Meanwhile, in a discreet clinic in Brooklyn, Victoria waited nervously for Dr. Chen. She had chosen a doctor far from the Reed social circle, someone who could maintain her confidentiality. 12 weeks, Dr. Chen confirmed after the examination. "The baby is healthy, but your stress level is too high. This can be harmful." Victoria held back tears. "I'm getting married in a week." "The father? He doesn't know." "Nobody knows." The doctor looked at her with compassion. "Victoria, pregnancy isn't something you can hide indefinitely, let alone postpone this conversation." "I know," she interrupted, wiping her eyes. "I just need to find the right moment." Back at the mansion, Victoria found Rosa waiting anxiously in the kitchen. "Dr. Anderson's test results have arrived," the cook informed her in a low voice. "Harrison asked them to be delivered here." The sealed envelope seemed to weigh a ton in her hands. Inside, the truth that would destroy everything. Her deal with Harrison, the chance to help her family, maybe even her reputation. "I need to destroy this," Victoria muttered, more to herself than to Rosa. "No," Rosa grabbed her arm. "Lies only breed more lies. You're not like that, Mihija." Before they could continue the conversation, Nicholas appeared in the kitchen doorway, his timing as disturbingly perfect as ever. "What an interesting coincidence," he smiled, his eyes fixed on the envelope. "Your test results?" Victoria instinctively hid the envelope behind her back. "That's none of your business." "On the contrary, dear future cousin," Nicholas advanced like a predator. "Anything that affects Reed Enterprises is my business. And something tells me that this envelope contains some very interesting information." "Nicholas," Harrison's voice thundered from the kitchen doorway, "I told you to stay away from my fiancée." The confrontation between the cousins was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. Rosa had accidentally knocked over a platter, creating enough of a distraction for Victoria to hide the envelope in her apron. Later, alone in her room, Victoria stared at the intact envelope on her dressing table. Next to it, Dr. Chen's pregnancy test confirmed what she already knew. In a week, she would marry Harrison Reed. In less than 6 months, her secret would be impossible to hide. The sound of a notification on her cell phone startled her. It was a message from an unknown number. Secrets have a way of coming out at the most inconvenient time. And Victoria sat down heavily on the bed, her hands shaking. Nicholas knew, or at least suspected, time was running out, and his choices were becoming more and more limited. The wedding was near, and with it, the moment of truth. The edge of the envelope was crumpled from Victoria, running it through her fingers during the sleepless night. On the morning of the Vanity Fair interview, she finally made her decision. With trembling hands, she tore open the envelope of Dr. Anderson's tests and fed the incriminating papers into the fireplace of her new bedroom. Miss Victoria, Martha, her new personal assistant, one of the many changes in her life, knocked on the door. The makeup team has arrived. The transformation from governess to fiancée of one of the most powerful men in New York took 2 hours. Victoria barely recognized herself in the mirror. With her elegantly groomed hair and professional makeup, the navy blue Prada dress perfectly disguised her still imperceptible belly. "You look stunning," Harrison commented when he met her in the hall. His look of genuine admiration only added to the weight of guilt in her chest. The presidential suite at the Four Seasons had been reserved for the interview. Vanity Fair journalist Claire Winters welcomed them with a calculated smile that didn't reach her investigative eyes. "So, tell me how this love story began." Claire began, her digital recorder perched strategically between them. Harrison held Victoria's hand, a rehearsed gesture that nevertheless sent shivers down her spine. "Actually, it was a gradual process. Victoria was always a constant presence, someone I could trust implicitly." "And when did you realize that your feelings had changed?" Claire pressed, her eyes fixed on Victoria. "It was during the Reed Foundation benefit last winter," Victoria replied, following the script they had prepared. "Harrison was overwhelmed by the recent death of his father, and we became close during that difficult time." The interview continued for an hour, with Claire trying to find holes in her story. When it finally ended, Victoria felt exhausted. "You were brilliant," Harrison praised as they walked back to the mansion. "Even I almost believed the story about the benefit." The comment, although well-meaning, made her feel even worse. At the mansion, an unpleasant surprise awaited them. Nicholas was chatting animatedly with Rosa in the kitchen. "Rosa was just telling me about your morning sickness, dear cousin," Nicholas commented casually, watching the color drain from Victoria's face. Harrison frowned. "Motion sickness? Probably wedding jitters," Victoria quickly interjected. "Rosa worries too much." Later, in his office, Harrison received worrying news from Maxwell Porter. The investigator hired by Nicholas is asking questions about Victoria in Phoenix, the lawyer informed him, specifically about her ex-fiancé, Marcus Sullivan. Victoria, who was passing through the corridor at that moment, froze when she heard Marcus' name. "Ex-fiancé?" Harrison's voice sounded tense. Victoria never mentioned a fiancé. "Apparently, he disappeared about 3 months ago," Maxwell continued. "No one knows his whereabouts." Victoria felt her world spin. 3 months, exactly when she discovered her pregnancy. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly as she silently stepped back. "Mi hija." Rosa found her in the back garden minutes later. "Nicholas isn't joking. He's going to find out everything." "I need to tell Harrison," Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But how?" The wedding is in 5 days. Better he knows from you than from Nicholas, Rosa argued. Before Victoria could reply, her cell phone vibrated with a message from Harrison. We need to talk. My office now. With her heart in her throat, Victoria made her way to the office. Every step seemed to take her closer to a precipice. Harrison was standing by the window, his posture tense. Why didn't you tell me about Marcus? I didn't think it was relevant, she replied, her voice trembling. You didn't think it was relevant to mention that you'd been engaged for less than 3 months? He turned, his eyes searching for answers. What else are you hiding, Victoria? The moment of truth had arrived. Victoria opened her mouth to confess everything, but was interrupted by Nicholas' abrupt entrance. Sorry to interrupt, he smiled, waving some papers around. But I thought you might like to see these. These are very interesting medical records. Victoria felt her world crumble. Somehow, Nicholas had gotten hold of a copy of the exam she had destroyed that morning. What do you want, Nicholas? Harrison asked, his voice laced with anger. Just to make sure you know exactly who you're marrying, cousin. Nicholas held out the papers to Harrison, but Victoria was quicker. Wait, she intervened, her voice surprisingly firm. Harrison, there's something I need to tell you. And I need you to hear it from me, not him. The silence that followed was deafening. The future of everyone present was hanging by a thread, and Victoria knew that her next words would change everything irrevocably. Victoria felt the weight of all the stares on her as she tried to find the right words. Harrison's office, normally an environment of power and control, seemed suffocating at that moment. I'm pregnant, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison remained motionless, his face an unreadable mask of contained emotions. Nicholas, on the other hand, couldn't contain a triumphant smile. Well, that certainly makes things more interesting, Nicholas commented, moving like a satisfied predator. I take it to father is the mysterious Marcus Sullivan? Get out, Harrison ordered, his voice dangerously controlled. Now, Nicholas. For the first time, Nicholas seemed to realize that he had crossed a line. With one last calculating glance at Victoria, he withdrew, closing the doors softly behind him. Harrison walked over to the bar, pouring himself a generous shot of whiskey. How long did you intend to keep this from me? I was going to tell, Victoria began, but was interrupted. When? Harrison turned around, his eyes sparking with restrained anger. After the wedding? When you started showing? Or maybe when the baby was born? Victoria felt the tears run down her face. My family, my mother's medical bills. So you decided to use me, Harrison concluded bitterly. Just like Nicholas said you would. No, Victoria protested, taking a step towards him. It's not that simple. When you proposed this deal, I was already desperate. Marcus disappeared as soon as I found out about the pregnancy. My parents are deep in debt. And you thought lying to me was the solution? Harrison slammed his glass down on the table, making Victoria jump. You were the only person I trusted completely in this house. Victoria's use of the past tense did not go unnoticed. Harrison, please. Maxwell is already on his way. Harrison interrupted her, his voice professional and distant. Let's settle this civilly. Less than an hour later, Victoria was sitting in her office while Maxwell Porter outlined his options. Harrison stood by the window, staring out at the mansion gardens. Considering the circumstances, Maxwell explained, we can keep the original agreement with a few modifications. The marriage goes ahead, but will include specific clauses about the child. No, Harrison finally said. I'm not getting married based on a lie. Victoria felt her heart sink. What about the companies? Nicholas? I'd rather lose the companies to Nicholas than live through an even bigger farce, Harrison replied, finally turning to face her. You'll get generous financial compensation, enough to take care of your family and the baby. But I can't. I won't build a marriage on false foundations. Maxwell began to prepare the necessary documents, while Victoria sat stunned by the direction her life had taken in a matter of hours. How long do I have to leave the mansion? She asked quietly. You can stay until you find somewhere suitable, Harrison replied, his tone softer. I won't leave you unattended. Rosa was waiting outside the office, her worried eyes watching Victoria emerge with a tear-streaked face. Oh mon, Mia. You can stay in my apartment for now. While packing her things, now a peculiar mix of housekeeper uniforms and designer clothes, Victoria found Dr. Chen's pregnancy test. The small ultrasound photos seemed to mock her. Her son hadn't even been born yet and was already responsible for so many dramatic changes. Harrison appeared at the bedroom door, watching her in silence for a moment. The financial settlement papers will be ready tomorrow. I've included an educational fund for the child. Victoria nodded, unable to face him. I'm sorry, Harrison. Not for the financial help. I know I don't deserve it after what I've done. I'm sorry for betraying your trust. I'm sorry too, he replied softly, for not creating an environment where you felt safe to tell me the truth from the start. The sound of excited voices downstairs caught both their attention. Nicholas had returned, this time with reporters. It seems my dear cousin has already leaked the story of the cancellation, Harrison commented bitterly. I'll deal with the press. Rosa will help you out the back. As she followed Rosa up the service stairs, carrying only a suitcase with the essentials, Victoria thought about how her life had changed so drastically in a matter of weeks. From housekeeper to Harrison Reed's almost fiancé, and now, a single mother with an uncertain future. Things will get better, Rosa whispered, guiding her to her car parked at the back of the property. Sometimes we need to lose everything to rebuild something truer. Victoria took one last look at the Reed mansion through the rearview mirror as they drove away. Somewhere inside, Harrison was facing the press and Nicholas, probably announcing not only the end of their engagement, but possibly the end of his control over Reed Enterprises. Guilt and regret weighed heavily on her heart, but a small part of her also felt relief. For the first time in weeks, there were no more lies to keep, no more secrets to keep. Now all that remained was to face the consequences of her choices and find a way forward. Nicholas Reed savored his victory on the rooftop of the Plaza Hotel, toasting with a 25-year-old McAllen while watching the sensational headlines about the cancellation of Harrison's wedding. His plan had worked perfectly, perhaps even better than he had hoped. Mr. Reed, his assistant, rushed in. I've just received confirmation. The extraordinary board meeting has been scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Nicholas smiled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Excellent. What about the other matter? We've located Marcus Sullivan in Seattle. He's working as a bartender in a second-rate bar. Meanwhile, in Rosa's modest apartment in Queens, Victoria was facing her first night away from the Reed mansion. The sofa bed was quite a change from the luxurious suite she had occupied in recent weeks, but the real discomfort came from inside. You need to eat something, Rosa insisted, placing a plate of rice and beans in front of her. What did Bibi? Victoria forced down a few mouthfuls, more for the baby than out of hunger. Her phone was constantly vibrating with social media notifications and messages from unknown numbers. The press had already discovered her contact details. At the Reed mansion, Harrison stared at the pile of documents Maxwell had left behind. The financial settlement for Victoria was generous. More than generous, in fact. Something in his chest contracted at the thought of her carrying a child alone, even if the betrayal of his trust still hurt deeply. Mr. Reed, Martha interrupted his thoughts. Your sister Caroline is on the line. Harrison sighed before picking up. Caroline was in Paris, but news traveled fast. It's not a good time, Care. That's exactly why I'm calling. His sister's voice sounded worried. I saw the news. What is Nicholas planning? The obvious. He's going to use this to bring me down tomorrow at the board meeting. And you're going to let him? Caroline asked, her voice defiant. Will you hand over everything Dad worked for to that snake? Harrison closed his eyes, exhausted. What do you suggest I do? Marry someone who lied to me from the start? No, Caroline replied after a pause. I suggest you think like our father would. He always said that people deserve a second chance when they act out of love. Love? Harrison laughed bitterly. She acted out of money, Caroline. Are you sure? Have you ever stopped to think why she chose to destroy the exams instead of showing them to Nicholas? Why she kept working even after you offered the financial settlement? Caroline's words echoed in his mind even after he hung up. Harrison poured himself a drink and walked over to the window, watching the city his father loved so much. In Rosa's apartment, Victoria finally managed to fall asleep, exhausted after hours of crying. Her dream was interrupted by the insistent sound of the doorbell. Rosa, still in a robe, opened the door to find Nicholas Reed grinning like a cat that had just caught a canary. "We need to talk, Victoria," he announced, entering uninvited. "I have an interesting proposal for you." Victoria straightened up on the sofa bed, instinctively protective. "I have nothing to talk to you about." "On the contrary," Nicholas smiled, taking a seat in an armchair. "I'm sure you'll want to hear what I found out about Marcus Sullivan." The name made Victoria freeze. Rosa stood in the doorway, her eyes alert like a lioness protecting her cub. "Marcus is in Seattle," Nicholas continued, savoring every word. "Working in a bar called the Rusty Nail. Interesting how some people just disappear, isn't it?" "What do you want?" Victoria asked, her voice trembling. "I want you to testify to the council tomorrow. Confirm that it was all just a scam by you to get money from Harrison. In return, I guarantee that Marcus will take responsibility. After all, I'm sure he wouldn't want his current employer to know about some incidents from his past." Victoria felt bile rise in her throat. "Are you blackmailing me?" "I'm offering a solution," Nicholas corrected gently. "Your son deserves a father, don't you think? And Harrison deserves to know the truth, that you manipulated him from the start." But that wasn't the truth, Victoria wanted to shout. The truth was much more complex, much more painful. It involved sleepless nights, worrying about her mother's medical bills, the shame of having been abandoned pregnant, and yes, guilt for having lied to Harrison. Not out of greed, but out of fear and desperation. "I'll let you think about it." Nicholas stood up, leaving a card on the table. "Call me by 8 a.m. with your decision." After he left, Rosa hugged Victoria, who was shaking uncontrollably. "Don't let him manipulate you, mi hija. There are other ways out." "Which ones?" Victoria sobit. "If I don't do what he wants, he'll destroy Marcus' life. And as much as he abandoned me, I can't do that." "What if you told Harrison the truth? The whole truth?" Victoria shook her head. "He'll never forgive me." "Maybe not," Rosa agreed softly. "But you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror knowing that, in the end, you chose honesty." Night was advancing over New York, and in different parts of the city, crucial decisions were being made. Harrison, in his office, was rereading his father's latest projects, looking for inspiration to face the day ahead. Nicholas, in his penthouse, was planning his next move as a chess player. And Victoria, in her small apartment in Queens, was facing the most difficult decision of her life: to continue lying to protect someone who had abandoned her, or to risk everything for the truth. Victoria spent the night in bed, Nicholas' cards seeming to burn on the coffee table. At 5 a.m, she made her decision. With trembling fingers, she typed a message to Martha, Harrison's assistant. "I need to see you before the board meeting." Across town, Harrison hadn't been able to sleep either. His sister Caroline's words echoed in his mind as he obsessively went through the files on his father's latest projects. That's when he found something interesting, a folder marked Phoenix Project. "Martha," he called through the intercom, "I need you to locate all the records on the Phoenix Project from 3 years ago." "Mr. Reed," Martha replied hesitantly, "I've just received a message from Ms. Martinez. She asked to see you before the meeting." Harrison felt his stomach turn. "Where is she?" "At Rose's apartment in Queens." After a moment's hesitation, Harrison grabbed his coat. "Get the car ready. And Martha, don't mention this to anyone." The sun was barely rising when Harrison's Mercedes pulled up in front of the modest building where Rosa lived. Victoria was waiting for him in the driveway, her dark circles under her eyes showing a sleepless night. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, leading him to a small cafe on the corner that was already open. "Why am I here, Victoria?" Harrison asked as they sat at a discreet table at the back. "Because you deserve to know the whole truth before the board meeting." Victoria took a deep breath. "Nicholas visited me last night." As Victoria recounted Nicholas' visit and his blackmail, Harrison watched every micro-expression on her face. The shame when she mentioned Marcus, the fear when she talked about her pregnancy, the determination when she came to her decision. "He wants me to testify against you," she concluded. "Tell him it was all my doing from the start." And it wasn't? Harrison couldn't contain the bitterness in his voice. No, Victoria faced him squarely. "Yes, I lied about the pregnancy, and that was wrong. But every moment we spent together, every conversation we had, that was real. Why should I believe you now?" Because I'm choosing to tell the truth, even though I know I'm going to lose everything. Tears glistened in her eyes. Nicholas knows where Marcus is. He's offering me to bring him back, to make him take over the baby. But I can't lie anymore, Harrison. Not about this. Harrison was silent for a long moment, processing his words. The Phoenix Project, he finally said. Do you know anything about it? Victoria frowned, confused by the change of subject. It was one of your father's last projects, a housing complex that Nicholas sabotaged, but never knew exactly how. I found some interesting files this morning. Harrison leaned forward. Apparently, Nicholas embezzled funds from the project through a series of shell companies. My father found out, but passed away before he could expose him. Why are you telling me this? Because I need to know if I can trust you one last time. Harrison checked his watch. The meeting is in 2 hours. Nicholas expects you to show up to testify against me. Instead, we can reveal what he did with Project Phoenix. Victoria felt her heart race. But what about Marcus? Leave Marcus to me. Harrison surprised her by holding her hand across the table. No child should grow up feeling unwanted. Believe me, I know what that's like. The cafe was almost empty, just a few sleepy workers eating their breakfast. Through the window, New York was starting to wake up, oblivious to the drama unfolding at that back table. Are you sure you want to do this? Victoria asked. Trust me after everything? No, Harrison admitted. But my father always said that sometimes you have to risk everything for what's right. And exposing Nicholas is the right thing to do. Meanwhile, at the Plaza Hotel, Nicholas received a message that made him smile. I'll be at the meeting. I'll do what you asked. Victoria, perfect, he muttered to himself, adjusting his Hermes tie in the mirror. Game over, cousin. What Nicholas didn't know was that at that very moment, Maxwell Porter was assembling a team of forensic auditors to examine the Phoenix Project records. Harrison and Victoria had left the cafe, each heading off to prepare for the battle to come. Victoria, Harrison called out to her before they got into separate cars. Whatever happens today, thank you for choosing the truth. She nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. It's the least I can do for my son, to show that sometimes it takes courage to do the right thing. The next 2 hours would be crucial. The future of Reed Enterprises, Victoria's reputation, and Nicholas' fate, all would be decided in the boardroom. And as the city woke up for another day, no one suspected that one of Manhattan's biggest corporate battles was about to begin. The Reed Company's boardroom was packed when Victoria arrived, accompanied by Maxwell Porter. The eyes of the board members followed her as she took her seat, some curious, others clearly hostile. Nicholas, sitting to the right of the head of the table, flashed his usual confident smile. Miss Martinez, he greeted her with false cordiality. I'm glad you decided to do the right thing. Victoria remained silent, her hands trembling slightly under the table. Maxwell discreetly placed a folder in front of her. Inside was the evidence of Nicholas' involvement in the Phoenix Project, carefully organized during the early hours of the morning by a team of auditors. Harrison entered last, his impeccable suit contrasting with the pronounced dark circles under his eyes. He took his place at the head of the table, directly opposite Nicholas. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, Nicholas began, rising, we are here today to discuss a serious matter. My cousin tried to defraud my uncle's last will through an arranged marriage with his housekeeper. Murmurs filled the room. Victoria felt her stomach churn, a combination of morning sickness and extreme anxiety. And I have here, Nicholas continued, Miss Martinez herself to confirm this fraud. All eyes turned to Victoria. She stood up slowly, her legs wobbly, but her voice surprisingly firm. It's true that Harrison Reed proposed a marriage of convenience to me, she began, noticing Nicholas Victoria's smile widen. But before we continue with that, I'd like to discuss another matter, the Phoenix Project. Nicholas' smile faltered. That has no relevance to our current discussion. On the contrary, Maxwell interjected, handing out copies of the documents to each member of the board. The Phoenix Project demonstrates a pattern of behavior that is extremely relevant to any decision about the future of Reed Enterprises. As the board members examined the documents, Victoria continued, Richard Reed's ultimate dream was to build affordable housing for low-income families, a project that was mysteriously sabotaged through a series of financial embezzlements. "That's ridiculous," Nicholas protested, but his voice had lost its former confidence. "These accusations are unfounded." "The numbers don't lie, Mr. Reed," one of the auditors present commented, pointing to specific transactions in the documents. "We have evidence of systematic transfers to shell companies directly linked to you." Harrison watched the scene in silence, noticing how some senior advisors began to exchange worried glances. They had known Richard Reed personally, had witnessed his passion for the Phoenix Project. "What about your pregnancy, Ms. Martinez?" Nicholas countered, trying to deflect the focus. "Why don't you tell the council about this little detail you kept from my cousin?" Victoria felt her blood run cold in her veins. The room fell completely silent. "Yes, I'm pregnant," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "And yes, I hid it from Harrison at first. It was wrong, and I take full responsibility for that decision. But unlike some people in this room, I chose to stop lying." "A touching confession," Nicholas scoffed. "But it only proves that you're as manipulative as I claim." "The difference," Harrison finally spoke up, standing up, "is that Victoria chose to tell the truth even when you offered an easy way out. She chose to do the right thing, even if it meant losing everything." "In you?" Nicholas laughed bitterly. "Are you going to defend someone who lied to you from the start?" "I'm going to defend our father's legacy," Harrison replied. "Something you've repeatedly tried to destroy." The next few minutes were intense, with the auditors presenting more evidence of Nicholas' deviations in the Phoenix Project. Victoria remained seated, an unconsciously protective hand on her belly, as she watched Nicholas' empire of lies crumble. "I propose an immediate vote," one of the senior counselors suggested, "on the permanence of Nicholas Reed in any position in Reed Enterprises." The vote was swift and decisive. Nicholas was removed not only from the board, but from any involvement with the companies. As he left the room, his face contorted with fury, Victoria felt an immense weight leave her shoulders. "The question of marriage still remains," another counselor reminded her. "The clause in the will—" "It will no longer be necessary," Harrison interrupted. "I've just received confirmation that Nicholas has forged that part of the will. Yet another of his manipulations has come to light." The meeting was adjourned shortly afterwards. Victoria was waiting in the corridor, uncertain about her next move, when Harrison approached her. "Thank you," he said simply, "for choosing the truth." "I'm sorry for everything," she replied, tears starting to pour. "You deserved to know from the start." "Yes, I did." Harrison sighed deeply. "But I understand why you didn't. And I admire your courage in doing the right thing today." Before they could continue the conversation, Maxwell appeared with urgent news. The police wanted to question Nicholas about other financial irregularities uncovered during the Project Phoenix investigation. Victoria watched Harrison walk away, knowing that much still needed to be resolved between them. But for the first time in weeks, she could breathe without the crushing weight of lies. Her future was uncertain, but at least it would be built on a foundation of truths. 2 days after the tumultuous board meeting, Victoria found a thick envelope on her bed in Rose's apartment. Inside was a generous check from Reed Enterprises and a formal letter ending her contract as a housekeeper. It was the official closing of a chapter in her life, but the weight on her heart didn't lessen. "I got an apartment in Astoria," she commented to Rosa as they prepared dinner. "It's small, but it has 2 bedrooms. I can move in next week." "Me hija," Rosa held her hands over the kitchen worktop. "You don't have to go so fast. You can stay here as long as you need to." Victoria smiled, grateful for Rose's unconditional support, but she knew she had to start again. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Maxwell Porter asking her to come to his office the next morning. Unfinished business, the message said. In the penthouse of Reed Tower, Harrison was reviewing the damage caused by Nicholas. The Phoenix Project had not been his only victim. They had uncovered a pattern of fraud stretching back years. Each new document revealed another layer of corruption. "Mr. Reed," Martha came in with a folder. "We found something interesting about Marcus Sullivan." Harrison took the folder, his stomach clenching as he read the contents. Marcus hadn't just abandoned Victoria. He had run off with $500,000 from a former employer in Phoenix. The money coincidentally disappeared around the same time that Victoria discovered her pregnancy. "Do you want me to pass this information on to Ms. Martinez?" Martha asked. "No," Harrison replied after a moment's thought. "She has enough to worry about." The next morning, Victoria walked through the lobby of the imposing Porter and Associates law firm. Maxwell greeted her personally, his expression softer than usual. "Victoria, thank you for coming," he gestured to a chair. "We have some legal issues to resolve. If it's about the financial settlement, I've already received the check," she began, but Maxwell interrupted her. "Actually, it's about your ex-fiancé, Marcus Sullivan." Maxwell opened a folder on his desk. "He's been located in Seattle, but there are complications." Victoria felt her heart race. "What kind of complications?" "He's being investigated for fraud." Maxwell chose his words carefully. "And there's evidence to suggest that he may have used you in his scheme." The room seemed to spin around Victoria. "What do you mean?" "The investigators believe that he approached you specifically because of your position at the Reed Mansion. Apparently, he had a history of relationships with female employees from wealthy families." The words hit Victoria like a punch in the gut. All the memories of her relationship with Marcus began to reconfigure themselves in this new light. The seemingly innocent questions about the Reeds, his sudden interest when he found out where she worked. "I was so stupid," she muttered, tears streaming down her face. "You were a victim," Maxwell corrected gently. "And now we need to make sure that you and your son are protected." Outside the office, Harrison was waiting in the corridor. He hadn't planned to be there, but something compelled him to come in person when he heard that Victoria was going to be informed about Marcus. When she came out of Maxwell's office, her eyes red from crying, Harrison felt an almost irresistible urge to hug her. Instead, he offered her a handkerchief. "Did you know?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I found out yesterday," he admitted. "I'm soda." Victoria let out a bitter laugh. "I really know how to choose the men I trust, don't I? First Marcus, then I lied to you." "Hey," Harrison interrupted her gently. "You chose to tell the truth when it mattered. That counts for something." They walked together to the nearby cafe, a heavy silence between them. Victoria ordered a ginger tea. Coffee still made her queasy, while Harrison opted for a double espresso. "What happens now?" she asked, more herself than to him. "Now you start again," Harrison replied. "And not alone. Reed Enterprises will make sure you and your son have everything you need." "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Harrison looked her in the eye. "It's the least I can do after you helped save my father's legacy." Victoria felt the baby move, a gentle movement that still surprised her every time. Instinctively, she put her hand to her belly. "Is it moving?" Harrison asked, his voice softening. She nodded, surprised by the genuine interest in his eyes. "It started a few days ago. It's like butterflies." For a moment, sitting in that cafe, there were just two people sharing something special, all the complications and hurts temporarily forgotten. Harrison found himself wondering what it would be like to be part of that, not by obligation or agreement, but by choice. "Victoria," he began hesitantly, "I know I have no right to ask this, but I'd like to be involved. Not as part of an agreement or out of obligation, but because I want to." She stared at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because despite everything, you're the most honest person I know. And your son deserves to have people in his life who have chosen to be there, not out of duty, but out of love." The word love hung between them, loaded with possibilities and unspoken fears. Victoria felt her heart racing, but this time it wasn't anxiety or guilt. It was something different, something she didn't dare name yet. Harrison's proposal echoed in Victoria's mind as she organized her new apartment in Astoria. The boxes scattered across the floor contained not only her belongings, but fragments of her old life. Uniform from the Reed Mansion mixed with the new maternity clothes Rosa had insisted on buy. "Let me help you with this," Amanda Chun, her doctor, offered as she lifted a heavy box. She had come for an informal follow-up visit, concerned about her patient's stress levels after recent events. "I still can't believe Marcus was using me all this time," Victoria confessed, sitting down heavily on the newly delivered sofa. "How could I have been so blind?" "Manipulators are experts at deception," Amanda replied, taking a seat next to her. "The question is, what are you going to do about Harrison's offer?" The question hung in the air like smoke. In the last 2 weeks, since that conversation in the cafe, Harrison had shown himself to be present in subtle but significant ways. A decorating expert showed up by chance to help with the apartment. A special account was opened for the baby's medical expenses. Small gestures that showed care without suffocating. Victoria's phone vibrated. It was Maxwell Porter. "Nicholas has been seen embarking for the Cayman Islands," he reported. "The police are monitoring his financial movements." And Marcus? Victoria couldn't help asking. "He was arrested this morning in Seattle. He's cooperating with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence." Victoria hung up the phone feeling strangely light. The closing of a cycle, perhaps, or the start of another. At Reed Tower, Harrison was facing his own internal battle. Reports on the Phoenix Project littered his desk. His father had dreamed of building affordable housing, creating communities. It was time to resurrect that dream. "Martha," he called to his assistant, "schedule a meeting with the urban development team." And he hesitated for a moment. "Call Victoria. I'd like her to take part." "As a consultant?" Martha asked in surprise. "As a partner," Harrison corrected. "She knows the reality of the families who need this project. Her perspective will be invaluable." News of the resumption of the Phoenix Project leaked to the press the following morning. Victoria was having coffee with Rosa when she saw the headline in the New York Times. "Reed Enterprises resurrects social project. A new beginning? He's trying me, Hija," Rosa commented, watching Victoria read the article. "In a different way, but he is." The phone rang. It was Harrison. "Have you seen the news?" "Yes," Victoria replied, her heart racing slightly. "It's brave to take up your father's project. I'd like you to be part of it." Harrison got straight to the point. "Not as a favor or compensation, but because you understand the people we want to help. You've lived it." Victoria thought of her parents in Phoenix, struggling with medical bills. She thought of the family she met during her years as a housekeeper, workers who could barely pay rent in New York. "When's the first meeting?" she asked, her mind made up. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m., Harrison replied, and Victoria could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll send a car to pick you up." The first meeting of the new Phoenix Project was unlike anything Victoria had ever experienced. Sitting at the conference table, no longer as a housekeeper, but as an active participant, she watched Harrison present the renewed vision of the project. "My father believed that decent housing is a right, not a privilege," Harrison explained to the team. "Victoria will lead our community research, ensuring that we meet the real needs of the families." After the meeting, as everyone was leaving, Harrison asked her to stay. "There's a place I want to show you." They drove to Brooklyn, stopping in front of a large lot surrounded by siding. "This will be the first site," Harrison explained, turning off the car. 40 housing units, community daycare, green space." "Why are you showing me this?" Victoria asked, although she already suspected the answer. "Because I want you to see that I'm serious." Harrison turned to face her. "About the project, about you, about us, if there is an us." Victoria felt the baby move, as if responding to the moment. "Harrison, you don't have the answer now," he interrupted her gently. "I just want you to know that I'm here. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because I chose to be." The afternoon sun painted the Brooklyn sky in shades of gold, and Victoria realized that, for the first time in months, she didn't feel afraid of the future. Lies had been replaced by truths, manipulations by genuine choices. "Let's build something real this time," she finally said, her hand finding his on the console of the car. Step by step, Harrison intertwined his fingers with hers, and in that simple moment, they both felt the weight of their previous histories dissolve, giving way to something new, something true, something that was just beginning. Fall arrived in New York, bringing a new dynamic to Victoria's life. Her belly, now visibly prominent at 5 months pregnant, could no longer be hidden under baggy blazers during Phoenix Project meetings. Mornings at Reed Tower were filled with discussions about floor plans, community impact studies, and meetings with local Brooklyn leaders. "The residents are worried about the family selection process," Victoria explained during a morning meeting, adjusting herself in the ergonomic chair Harrison had insisted on providing for her office. "They fear that the project will end up benefiting people from outside the community." Harrison watched as she presented her research, admiring how Victoria had naturally adapted to the role of community leader. There was no longer any trace of the shy housekeeper. In her place was a confident woman who knew intimately the needs of the people she was trying to help. "We could set up a local committee," he suggested, taking notes. "Give the community a voice in the selection process." A knock on the door interrupted the discussion. Martha entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Reed, we just got a call from the DA's office. Marcus Sullivan has accepted a plea bargain. He's going to testify against Nicholas." Victoria felt her heart race. Since the discovery of Marcus' fraud, she had tried to bury that part of her past and focus on the future. But some wounds were still open. "He asked for you," Martha added softly. "Do you want a chance to explain?" No, Victoria's answer was immediate and firm. "There's nothing to explain." Harrison observed the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand instinctively protected her belly. Over the last few months, as they worked together on the Phoenix Project, he had learned to read her reactions, to understand her unvoiced fears. "Martha, cancel my afternoon meetings," he decided. "Victoria and I have an important appointment." Victoria looked at him, confused, but Harrison just smiled. "Trust me." An hour later, they were on the terrace of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one of Victoria's favorite places in the city. The hanging garden offered a spectacular view of Central Park in its autumn colors. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, accepting the ginger tea he had brought in a thermos. "Because you need perspective," Harrison replied, leaning against the parapet. "Look at the city. 6 months ago, you were my housekeeper, and I was about to lose my father's companies. Now look where we are." Victoria took in the view, letting his words sink in. The Phoenix Project was moving forward, transforming lives. Her son was growing up healthy, protected not by lies or manipulation, but by honest choices and genuine support. "I received Marcus' divorce papers this morning," she revealed suddenly. "Apparently, we got legally married in Vegas during that trip last year. I didn't even know. He must have planned the whole thing as part of a scheme." Harrison felt a surge of anger, but controlled it. "Does that change anything for you?" "It changes everything and nothing," she replied, turning to face him. "I felt guilty that I was developing feelings for you while carrying another man's child. Now I find out that even those based on lies." The autumn wind stirred her hair, and Harrison resisted the urge to touch it. Instead, he covered her hand on the ledge with his own. "Our feelings are the only real thing in this whole story," he said softly. "And unlike anything that came before, they grew naturally, based on truth and mutual trust." Victoria felt tears forming in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, of acceptance. "The baby kicked," she whispered, moving his hand to her belly. Harrison felt the gentle movement under his palm, and something in his chest expanded. It wasn't the first time he'd felt the baby. In recent weeks, Victoria had begun to share these moments with him, but each time seemed just as miraculous. "He or she will grow up knowing only love and honesty," Harrison promised. "Regardless of what happens between us." "In what's happening between us?" Victoria finally verbalized the question that had been hanging between them for weeks. "Something real," Harrison replied, stepping closer. "Something we build brick by brick, just like the Phoenix Project. No rush, no pressure, just true," she added, allowing herself to lean towards him. Their first kiss wasn't like in the movies. There were no fireworks or music in the background. It was gentle, hesitant, full of unspoken promises and future possibilities. When they parted, they were both smiling. "I think we need to update the project committee on this change in our working relationship," Victoria joked, still close to him. "Let them talk," Harrison replied, kissing her forehead. "This time there's nothing to hide." The first snow of winter was blanketing Manhattan when Victoria entered her new office in Reed Tower. 3 months had passed since that afternoon at the Metropolitan Museum, and the changes in her life were as evident as her 7-month womb. "The community impact reports have arrived," Martha announced, handing over a thick folder. "And Dr. Anderson called to confirm your appointment this afternoon." Victoria smiled, absent-mindedly stroking her belly as she leafed through the documents. The Phoenix Project had become her personal mission, a way of repaying the trust Harrison had placed in her. "Victoria, Rosa appeared at the door, now no longer the cook at the Reed Mansion, but the coordinator of the project's community food program. Nicholas is on the news. The name still gave Victoria an involuntary shiver. Turning on the TV in her office, she watched the report on Nicholas Reed's conviction for financial fraud. The images of him being escorted out of court, handcuffed and grimacing, seemed to close a painful chapter for good. 15 years, Harrison commented, entering the office. And you'll have to pay back every penny embezzled from the Phoenix Project. Victoria noticed the dark circles under his eyes. He had been up all night preparing for the trial. Without saying a word, she poured him a cup of the coffee Rosa had brought. "How's our little builder today?" Harrison asked, his hand naturally finding Victoria's belly as he approached. "Very active," she smiled. "I think he's celebrating justice being done." The moment was interrupted by Maxwell Porter, who rushed in with more documents. The divorce papers have been finalized. Marcus has fulfilled his part of the agreement. Victoria took the documents, a mixture of relief and melancholy coursing through her body. It was official. She was free of all the lies and manipulations of her past. "Time to focus on the future," Harrison commented softly, noticing her contemplative expression. "The first block of the Phoenix Project will open in 2 weeks." The mention of the project brought Victoria back to the present. The 40 housing units were ready, transforming that empty lot in Brooklyn into a residential complex that honored Richard Reed's original vision. "The families start moving in next week," Victoria informed us, consulting her tablet. Rosa organized a welcome party with the community committee. Speaking of parties, Harrison snorted, suddenly nervous. "There's something I want to show you." He led her to the private elevator, up to the penthouse of Reed Tower. Victoria had never been there. It was Richard Reed's old apartment, left untouched since his death. "Harrison," she whispered, realizing the importance of the moment. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," he replied, unlocking the door. "I've spent the last 2 months renovating this place." The apartment had been transformed. The heavy, dark furniture had been replaced by more modern, welcoming pieces. One of the rooms had been converted into a baby's room, decorated in soft shades of green and yellow. "I know it's still early," Harrison began, his voice betraying a rare nervousness. "But I want you to know that there's a place for both of you here. Not just in the apartment, but in my life." Victoria felt tears forming in her eyes as she toured the baby's room. Every detail had been thought of with care, from the handmade mobile to the nursing chairs strategically positioned by the window, overlooking Central Park. "I'm not asking for an answer now," Harrison continued, stepping closer. "I just want you to know that, unlike everything that started with lies and manipulation, this is real. It's built on truth, trust, and love," Victoria added, turning to face him. "You can say the word, Harrison. It's what we've built up over these months, isn't it?" He smiled, that rare smile that made her eyes sparkle. "Yes, it's love. And unlike the skyscrapers we've built, this feeling doesn't need blueprints or approvals. It simply exists, grows, and gets stronger every day." The baby chose that moment to kick particularly hard, making Victoria laugh through her tears. "I think someone agrees." "Well," Harrison asked, his hand finding hers, "what do you say we build this future together? Not by obligation, not by agreement, but by choice." Victoria looked out of the window, observing the city that had witnessed her transformation from insecure governess to independent and fulfilled woman. Every choice, every truth revealed, every moment of courage had led her there. "Yes," she replied, her heart overflowing with certainty. "Let's build this together." Spring arrived in New York, bringing not only the blossoming of the cherry trees in Central Park, but also the arrival of Victoria's son. James Richard Martinez Reed was born on a sunny April morning, his tiny fingers gripping Harrison's tightly as he watched in amazement at the miracle of life in his arms. "He's got your eyes," Harrison whispered to Victoria, who was resting on the hospital bed, exhausted but overjoyed. The baby, with his dark hair and deep brown eyes, was the perfect combination of strength and innocence. The news of the birth coincided with another significant milestone: the completion of the first phase of Project Phoenix. The 40 selected families had already settled into their new homes, and the community creche was about to open. "We need a name for the creche," Rosa commented during one of her daily visits to the hospital. She had become not only the coordinator of the food program, but a real grandmother to James. How about Richard Reed Community Center? Victoria suggested, settling James in her arms to breastfeed him. To honor the man who dreamed it all up first, Harrison, who was organizing some documents on the hospital table, always the workaholic, even in personal moments, looked up with barely contained emotion. My father would have loved that, and he would have loved meeting his grandson even more. Adapting to the new reality was a gradual process. Victoria and James moved into the penthouse of Reed Tower when they were discharged, transforming the once solemn space into a home full of life. Richard Reed's austere old paintings now shared space with black and white photos of the development of the Phoenix Project in colorful family pictures. One afternoon, while Victoria was nursing James in his favorite armchair by the window, Harrison entered the room with a peculiar expression. "I just received an interesting letter," he announced, taking a seat on the arm of the armchair. "Marcus is requesting permission to send James a letter when he's older." Victoria felt her heart squeeze slightly, but not with the same intensity as before. "What do you think?" "I think that's your decision," Harrison replied, his hand naturally finding James' dark curls. "But I also think that our son deserves to know his full story when the time is right." "Our son," Victoria repeated softly, savoring the words. That was how Harrison always referred to James. Without hesitation, without reservations. The unconditional love he showed for the baby was just further proof of the depth of his character. Life found its own rhythm. Mornings were filled with project meetings, now conducted with James sleeping peacefully in his baby carriage in the corner of Victoria's office. Afternoons were dedicated to visits to the construction site of the second phase of the Phoenix Project, where 60 more housing units were being built. "Do you know what impresses me the most?" Maxwell commented during one of these visits, watching Harrison proudly show off the progress of the work while carrying James in a sling. How something that started with an ultimatum and an agreement of convenience turned into something so genuine and impactful. Victoria smiled, watching father and son interact with the construction workers. Sometimes we need to go down crooked paths to find our true direction. The transformation wasn't just limited to their personal lives. Reed Enterprises, under the joint leadership of Harrison and Victoria, had become a model of corporate social responsibility. The Phoenix Project inspired similar initiatives in other cities, and Victoria was often invited to share her experience at conferences on sustainable urban development. One night, after putting James to bed, Harrison found Victoria on the roof terrace, watching the city lights. "A penny for your thoughts," he joked, wrapping his arms around her. "I was thinking about how unpredictable life is," she replied, leaning back against him. "A year ago, I was your housekeeper, hiding a pregnancy and terrified of the future. Now you're my partner in every way," Harrison added, turning her to face him. "And it's time to make it official." Victoria held her breath as he got down on one knee, presenting a delicate sapphire ring. Not an ostentatious diamond ring like the first time, but something much more meaningful. "Will you marry me?" he asked simply. Not by agreement, not for convenience, but because we've built something real and true together. Tears blurred her vision as she nodded, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger. From the bedroom, James' soft crying brought them back to the reality of their shared life. "Duty calls," Harrison smiled, entwining his fingers with hers as they walked to attend to their son. And so, under the starry Manhattan sky, another chapter began in their story. No longer a story of secrets and agreements, but of love, truth, and endless possibilities. The Phoenix Project had not only transformed a community, but also their own lives, proving that from the ashes of lies can come the most beautiful truths.